I'll give this a minute to see if anyone hops on. If you see me looking away, I'm streaming from my phone but using my computer so I can keep up with any comments from anybody. So please let me know if you can hear me okay. There's a fan going in the background and I have some music playing over the computer. So if you can't hear me, just let me know. Om Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Om Aim Saraswati Namaha. Om Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhurбhuva Swaha Tat Saviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dio yo na prachodayat. Om Trayambakam yajamahe sugandhim pushtivardhanam urvarukamiva bandhanan mrityor mukshiyamamritat. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Tat Sat. Pranams to all divine souls that may be watching this video tonight. I know many of us are struggling with the loss of our Guruji Swami Nikhilananda Saraswati. It was very unexpected. Some of you might know me, some of you might not. I'm Yogini Urmila, and you've probably seen me on the live streams and on the YouTube channels, and I've spoken with quite a few of y'all on the phone, and I've gotten messages today from several people feeling lost and wondering what's going to happen. And Guruji, I've been learning from him since 2020, and he encouraged me to start making videos and doing things on my own and sharing the knowledge and the wisdom that I've gained from my own practices and from him. And I never got around to it. I always had my own concerns and things like that. Just, I didn't feel good enough. I didn't feel ready enough. I didn't feel worthy enough to share more than just commentary. But I wanted to pick up our weekly Satsanga video to honor Guruji and carry on his teachings through Yoga Vasistha, and I hope this helps whoever hops on and watches and joins, and maybe it'll become a weekly thing. I'm nowhere near as versed, and it will never amount to how Guruji taught us everything that we know. He's shone a light on so many lives and impacted so many of us in so many ways, and there's no greater way to honor him and tribute to him other than doing what he's always told us to do, is to share what we learn and put into practice what we learn and just keep pushing through and going day to day. He's taught us that life is transient. This body is a vessel. We are on this earth to practice and to learn. This is our training ground for our soul and to become liberated in this lifetime, because a human embodiment is an absolute gift, and there's no greater gift other than this rare opportunity that we have. So I hope that my small part shines a light on his teachings and just touches the lives of others, because that's all he would want me to do. So we can get started. If you have the physical book, we are on the first volume, book 1. If you don't have the book, the scripture, you can purchase it online through yrf.org. That's the Yoga Research Foundation. And we are currently on page 89, and Guruji had left off with section 27, denunciation of all objects that obstruct self-realization. And I don't know how long the video will be. I'm just going to go with the flow. And I went through earlier, and I think it was timely, where Guruji had left off and where it picks back up. The mind of a person is constantly involved in thoughts such as these. This work must be performed now. That work must be completed in the future. I should not have done a particular work in the past. All this involvement is in vain. All these works are directed towards the attainment of the perishable pleasures of the world. This human embodiment is a gift, and time is transient. There is no time other than the present, and we spend so much of our short time in this embodiment on this planet constantly stuck and thinking, especially in today's society where we're rushed and we're stressed, and there's always one more thing to do, one more thing to handle. The to-do list, the honey to-do list, the grocery list, the lists are endless, and they're always going to be endless. And there's thoughts of regret of things we may have done in the past, but the past is the past, and we can't change the past, but we can learn from the past, and we can change our behaviors and our perspective and our thoughts towards what we did, and we know better, and we do better, and we move forward. And then we also think about the future, especially parents. I know the younger generations are thinking a lot about the future because things are hard right now. Economically, there's mental health challenges, jobs are harder to find, and people are struggling, and there's a lot of stress, and that holds us back when we put so much effort and time and energy into the should've, would've, could've thought process, and we get stuck in this cycle. And for what changes? We can't change the past. We can't exactly predict the future. We're not future fortune tellers. We don't know what's going to happen, and that is the reality. Is there is only the present. There's only the time that we have right now, and how are we going to spend this time? Are we going to spend months? Are we going to spend years just stressing over everything? We might have bills piled up, and in practical manners, yes, things are hard and things can happen and things can be challenging. Like if you don't pay a car note and your car gets repossessed, that's something practical that is realistic that happens in this world. But how are we going to respond to this? How are we going to handle this? These things, we can only do what we can do. And how are we going to be involved with our thoughts, with our life? How are our actions being done, and how are we directing them? Where are we spending that energy? Are we putting it towards our stress? Are we putting it towards regret? Or are we focusing on our inner self? Are we focusing on our spiritual practices that help us get through the day to day? Are we scared? Do we have fears? Do we have anxieties? There's so many things that go through the mind, and that's where the mind is just, it's constant. That's where the monkey mind, it's not just distractions when you're trying to focus on something and you get distracted. It's also your daily thoughts of taking care of your children or your spouse or your jobs and careers, and just the practical realities of being in a human embodiment in this world. moving on from that, like old leaves falling from a tree and new leaves taking their place, the souls continue to leave old bodies in order to reincarnate in new ones. Those who lack wisdom must continue to revolve in the cycle of birth and death. I really liked this analogy because the time of year right now, especially, I'm down in Texas in the United States, and only some of our trees change colors and drop their leaves. And so it's always a reminder of the cycles and the cycles of life and the nature of things. And the leaves, they bloom in the spring, and they're vibrant and youthful and colorful, and there's just so much energy, and then they dry out and they crumple and they break and they fall and they break down into the soil and the ground, and they go back to the earth, and then the cycle starts over in the spring again. And so just like the leaves from the tree and through the cycles, our soul goes through these cycles of embodiments, and when we're done with one embodiment and we shed that one based on our karmas, we get a new embodiment if we are not liberated in this lifetime. And so we're like the leaves falling from the tree, and it's just this cycle that continues and continues and continues, that cycle of birth and death, birth and death, birth and death, and until you become liberated from that, and then there is no more cycles. Alas, only the dull-witted can find rest in this perishable world without working for the true purpose of their existence through the service of sages and saints. The dull-witted in this context is speaking on ignorance, and not in a mean way, not in a negative way. It's in regards to the ignorance of the self, the essence of the self, because we are not this physical body. This physical body does not define who we are, what we are at our core. And so the dull-witted, they're able to find rest in the perishable world. They don't practice spiritual practices. They are not working towards attaining liberation for their soul. They are working towards worldly goals, worldly objects, and that is their quote-unquote source of happiness. That is where they find joy. That is where they find their rest. That is what brings them comfort despite the transience of the worldly objects. So that could be shopping, that could be food, that could be vacations every year, that could be even holidays and giving or gifting presents. And the ones that are working for the true purpose of their existence through the service of sages and saints, the true purpose of this embodiment, this existence on this earth, is liberation of our soul, is God realization, is self-realization, and that is only attained in human embodiment because we have that intellect, we have that level of discrimination, of thinking, and so we are able to analyze and make choices, make conscious decisions, whereas other life forms are not at that level of capability, such as some animals and plants. They're all alive. Everything is scientifically alive, but what is missing is intellect. And so without the intellect to choose how to spend your existence, they too will be stuck in that cycle. They, the dull-witted, are able to enter a joyous sleep due to their intense ignorance. The joyous sleep is not the sleep that many people think about, like where you're actually getting in your bed and you're falling asleep. The body is asleep. What it is talking about, what Lord Rama is talking about, is they're able to enter a joyous sleep due to the intense ignorance. The intense ignorance of the self is what makes someone asleep. They're asleep to the knowledge of the self, knowing themselves, and due to that sleep and not knowing and not understanding the transience of worldly objects, they enter into that joyous feeling. They find comfort in the worldly objects and the worldly activities. And that's fine to enjoy things. It's fine that you're happy and joyous spending time with family or hobbies, enjoying your job. That's not the type of joyous that this is talking about. This is the ignorance of the self, and it's like the ignorance is bliss. And so the ignorance of the self is what causes that person to feel joyous, to feel that bliss, but it's not real, because that's not the true source. The true source of bliss and joy is the self in our hearts. But how can a reflective person rest in peace without serving the true cause of his existence? So with the intellect and being able to reflect, that can bring peace, but can also bring anxiety for some people. The true purpose of our existence is to liberate our soul, to unite with God. God realization, self-realization, there's many names for it. When someone reflects on this and are able to discriminate between real and unreal, that can cause anxiety and that can cause stress in some people on what is their purpose, what is the cause of their existence, where did they come from, what is sustaining them. And that's where the inquiry and these questions come up. A person has hardly removed the impediments to pleasure from his way and has hardly encountered a shower of prosperity when he sees death waiting at his door for the termination of his life. And this segment makes me think of how we go through this human embodiment, most of us, and we spend so much time on worldly enjoyments, worldly involvements. And when we do that, we're not putting the focus on spiritual practices. We're not focusing on removing impediments that are in our way. And those can be our ignorance, they can be our anger, our greed, our lust, our violence, our harmful thinking. It can be so many different things. And we spend what we think I mean, most people think, yeah, I'm going to live until I'm 80, 90, 100 years old. But the reality, the truth is that none of us know when our time will come. And like Guruji has always told us, and it's one of his analogies I always liked, he compared us to food, like vegetables and stuff in a grocery store. And he said, we don't walk around with an expiration tag across our forehead like all the food does in the store. We don't know when our expiration date is. And so we need to contemplate that and think about how we are spending our days, how we are spending our time. Are we making time for our spiritual practices? No matter what religion, no matter what path you are on, it honestly doesn't matter, because they all do take work, they take dedication, they take sincerity. It's not just showing up for a few minutes and disappearing the rest of the week, or doing things halfway. And then suddenly you find yourself facing death for whatever reasons. And that is something that Guruji actually helped me with, because when I came across Guruji, I was extremely, extremely sick, and my body, my physical body, was in the process of shutting down. It was in the process of dying. And that is something that I experienced, that fear, when I was met with imminent death if something didn't change. And you go through those regrets, you go through those worries, those fears, those what ifs, and you look back on the past. And like we mentioned earlier, the mind of the person is constantly involved in those thoughts, and those thoughts can and will consume you. And that's why it's important to work on our spiritual practices and develop that one-pointed mind. And it's true, when death is at your door, how do you want to feel? What thoughts do you want going through your mind? Do you want to experience fear or regret in your last moments? Or do you want to feel peace and comfort knowing that you had a great life, you contributed to the world in whatever way that you could, you loved all, you served all, you were good? And that is what is important in this human embodiment, and how we spend it. And that is what's going to matter in those moments, at that time when our own expiration date comes. And I find it it's relatable. And then with the recent passing of Guruji, it was unexpected for all of us. Many of us had just spoken to him on the phone or video chats, or we were supposed to call him back or message him back, email him back, or we were in the middle of helping him with something. And then now that won't happen. And that's the transience of things. Even Guruji didn't know. But I do know that his thoughts were where they needed to be. He was exactly where he needed to be. That's where God placed him. It was his time. And we have to remember, God's timeline is not our timeline. God's plan and time is not the worldly time and plan that we see as humans with our ignorance. That's not how it works. When our time is ready, we're gone. That's it. And that's all we know. We know our time is coming, but we don't know when. It could be today, it could be tonight, tomorrow, a year, 5 years, 10 years. So how are we going to spend the time that we have? Are we going to work on ourselves? Are we going to remove these impediments? Are we going to enjoy the prosperity of a spiritual journey and connecting with our true self and having a relationship with God in whatever capacity, no matter what religion? They all work towards uniting with God, uniting with the creator of everything that we see, everything we smell, we hear, we taste, we touch, as far as the human brain can possibly make sense of everything, as far as the cosmos. Who created that? How did that happen? Why is Earth not just falling? Why are the planets in the certain order that they are? Whatever that is, in the practices you do, that is what we are working towards uniting with. And so that's where there's many names for God, and I respect all of them. I truly do. They all lead to the same thing. Like waves rising and falling in the vast ocean, so people are born to die and die to be reborn. The waves rise and fall endlessly, and we do not know why. And that's another good way of looking at the transience of everything that is alive, and to look at our lives when you think of the ocean and the waves, and they come and they go up and they go down. That's how our lives are. 1 minute they're up and then they're gone and they merge back into the ocean. And you can look at the ocean as God, as Brahman, as the creator, as the divine, and our embodiments, our life, are these waves, and the waves eventually merge back into the ocean, and the waves are always going to be there. There's always going to be waves. Thousands of people gather at a fair or at a pilgrimage place, but eventually they must separate from each other. In the same way, this world is an accidental gathering of souls at a passing fair. And this one I really liked also, because it reminded me of a train station, and we're all like passengers on this planet, and Earth is like the train station, and we're all here just kind of with our tickets, waiting around until our ticket is called. And in the meantime, we're passing our time, we're making choices, and everyone's choices are different for many, many different reasons. And when our ticket's called, we separate, and some people leave and some people are still here, and then the next moment more people leave and more people show up too, because lives come into the world all the time. Every second there's more lives coming into the world. Like lamps that go out when they use up their oil, so are human lives. Kindled by the flame of desire, and subsisting on the oil of attachments, there is nothing substantial in this evanescent world. Just as a tree that once offered cooling shade and nectarine fruits is cruelly cut down by the axes of the woodcutters, so too the life of a man, in spite of his gracious acts and benevolent qualities, is cut down by the cruel axe of death. And so death is always there. Death is something that none of us can avoid. None of us can dodge. We can't hide from it. Anything that is living is going to die. Plants, animals, and humans alike. Everyone has a different timeline. And the tree that once offered cooling shade and nectarine fruits, for me, when I think about this, and then where it says, in spite of his gracious acts and benevolent qualities, even if there was the most perfect person on the planet, and they had the most perfect qualities, and they did all the right things, and they contributed to communities and charities, and they just did everything perfect, even that person cannot avoid death. That acts of death is still going to come. And we can see nowadays with all medical advancements and how they're trying to work to extend our lives to where we live longer and longer and longer, and we look more youthful and more youthful and more youthful over time. And people put so much money into these things, and they stress over these things, all to end up going through the process of death, just like the rest of us. And you don't take anything with you when you die. You don't take the fancy cars. You don't take the belongings in your house, the clothes on your back, your fancy jewelry. All these things get left behind, and eventually they're in the garbage or they're someone else's. And so no matter who you are, the acts of death is not avoidable. It will happen. And like the lamps, eventually they go out when the oil is run through and it's burned through. And that's like us, our life essence within us. And if you think scientifically also, if you think of how all the cells work in the body and cellular death and the aging process, you might be able to slow that down a little bit, but ultimately everyone passes, and that light, that energy in the body, that is there, but the physical body is gone. It's just a vehicle. It's a tool. It is to get us from point A to point B. So like I mentioned earlier, it's like we're sitting in a train station and we're waiting on our train. We're waiting for our ticket to be called. The development of attachment towards loved ones is like coming in contact with a poisonous tree. Though pleasing in the beginning, the poison continues to affect the very bloodstream of a person, causing him to faint and to die in course of time. And attachments, this is a really big part of our spiritual journey, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of reflection, because our attachments are very strong, and some of the attachments that we naturally have as humans can actually be challenging to think about. So you're not just dealing with attachments to like objects. Like I have my headphones, my AirPods, And people can become very attached to an object, and that attachment is almost like an addiction, and the attachment itself causes stress and anxiety, like, oh my gosh, it costs so much money, what if it breaks and then I have to replace it, or what if I lose it, or someone steals it. And it's a similar thing towards our loved ones, and this is a really hard topic for people to discuss and think about, but it's a very important one, because our attachments to our family, like our attachments to our children or our spouses, our partners, other family members, friends, teachers, gurus, our attachments towards other people, it can become like poison, in the sense of we see our attachment as our love for these people and our strong love to protect them and to take care of them. But then if something happens, it hurts. And I know that's something that many are experiencing right now with Guruji's passing, is the hurt, the pain, because as much as the guru is not the physical body, and we were taught that guru is not the physical body, guru is the spirit that lives in our heart, it is the teachings, we can still end up attached to the physical body, getting attached to seeing him and talking to him, and we get attached to weekly satsang and learning. We can get attached to scriptures too. And so there's like a fine line with an unhealthy attachment and then a healthy attachment. Kind of similar with desires, where like if you desire a bigger house or to be wealthy or to be rich, and that causes a lot of anxiety and stress and pain, then that's not good. But when you have a desire for your soul to be liberated, or you have a desire to read your scriptures and spend time with God and praying and talking, and that's more along the lines of a more healthier attachment. It's not a painful one. It's a good one because it's taking you in a good direction, not a unhealthy direction. It's not making things worse. And so instead of being like poison or like a poisonous tree, it's more like a soothing balm. And yes, Jim, the body is a vehicle, and we trade in for a new model when this one wears out. Absolutely. And it's nice to see you on here, because how I was saying that attachments can be like coming in contact with a poisonous tree. As an herbalist, you can understand this, where if you have a rash or something and it is real itchy and it bothers and you always have to scratch at it, but then you have to find that soothing balm to soothe the irritation, to soothe the pain, to ease it up a bit. That's similar to the attachment and detachment in a way, where your attachments are painful and like poison, and when you aren't in an unhealthy way attached to things, you don't go through that pain as much. You might still, because we are human, we have emotions, we do have feelings, and we have to acknowledge those. We can't suppress them, because suppressing them is not healthy for anybody. But we can sit with it, and we can acknowledge it and not become all consumed with it. And we can turn to our healthy desires, such as our scriptures or our spiritual practices, and that is like our soothing balm, and it brings us peace, and it is good for us. There is no aspect of the world which is not defective. There is no direction that is not caught in the fire of misery. There is no being that is not subject to death. There is no action that is not tinged with evil. So I like how this points out that there is no aspect of the world which is not defective, because what is real and what is unreal comes into play here. What is real is the self, and this is where the topic of the world is an illusion can come in, because what we are seeing, like visually with our eyeballs, what we are seeing is transient. You can look around and you can see the trees that aren't going to be here in 20, 30, 50, 100 years, houses that you know aren't going to be here in 100 years, people that aren't going to be here. You look around and everything in a way is defective, because it has a beginning and an end. It's not timeless. It's not eternal. What is eternal is what is truth, and that is the self, the spirit within us that carries on, that lives on, that becomes liberated. That is what is truth. That is what is not defective. Everything else is what is defective. Like my physical body is defective because I have chronic health conditions that I deal with every day. And so there's always something going on. But despite all these things going on with the physical body, the self within me, the essence within this vehicle is not touched, is not harmed. And that's talked about in the Gita, where the self cannot be burnt, it cannot be cut, it cannot be hurt. The self is not affected. It is our mind and our thoughts that are effective, our perspective and how we see things and how we handle our emotions. That is what is impacted. There's no direction that is not caught in the fire of misery. So basically, anywhere we turn, there's going to be misery until we turn inwards, until we learn to reflect, until we not, in a sense, give up, but until we surrender to whatever the higher power is, that in respect to varying practices, whatever the higher power is that you believe in, until we surrender to that, there's going to be misery, because we will constantly be grasping and looking for the next best thing, the next thing to make us feel better. And we might feel better for a few minutes or a few days, and then we're back to square one and we're grasping at straws again. And this is how an example would be like shopping addictions. And it feels really good. You get that adrenaline rush and you get the feel-good hormones going in the brain because you're buying things and you like them and they're cute and they're pretty, or they smell good, or it's something you've wanted, it was a really good sale. And then you get home and you unpack all your bags, you play around with whatever you bought, and you put it away, and then you're back to like, okay, now what? Because it was a transient feeling, it was fleeting, it was passing, and that shows us that these objects, they bring pain, they bring sorrow, they bring misery, because those things, those worldly things, are not the source of true, absolute peace. They are just worldly objects. They are illusions. It's Maya. The world of enjoyment is sustained by a series of modifications. All trees are nothing but wood. All human bodies are nothing but flesh and blood. All objects are modifications of Maya, the cosmic illusion. There is nothing substantial or real in this world. And this is very true. And we can also think of how Guruji would bring up gold, and there's many different variations of jewelry. There's necklaces and rings and earrings and gold statues and everything, but for a jeweler, they see gold, that's it. They don't care what the ring looks like, they don't care what the necklace really looks like, they see gold. It's just gold in different modifications. And that's how this world of so-called enjoyment is sustained. And you can look back to the history of how humans have evolved over time and how advanced we might think we are now. But with all the different advancements, and if you break down everything, like there's a TV in front of me, it's not on, but I can look at it and yes, it's a TV, but it's made of plastic. That plastic itself is made up of elements. Those elements are chemicals. If you just keep bringing it back and peeling back the layers and the layers and layers, everything is ultimately just a modification of different levels of the elements of the world and chemicals. And if you're a science person or you're in physics, you might understand this a bit more. The peeling back of the layers, everything microscopically, you're looking at protons and neutrons and electrons, atoms and molecules, the smallest particles you can think of. I'm made up of that. This phone I'm using is made up of that. My glasses are made up of that. All of you watching are made up of that. That is what these bodies are made of. We look different because they're modifications. They are different levels of chemicals that one person's got blue eyes, the next person has brown because of DNA and pigments. It's all different levels. And so the world is just sustained by a series of modifications. And you see it like in the trees. Trees are trees, but look how many species of trees there are. Look how many shrubs and flowers there are. You could say, oh, look at that pretty butterfly. And then think, wow, how many different modifications of butterflies are there? They're all still butterflies, but they are different modifications. And so it's in nature, it's in physical, tactile objects, it's in ourselves. Everything is a series of modifications. And that's what makes the world spin. That's what makes it work. That's what makes society work as a society. That's humanity. That is community and the environment. Our human bodies are nothing but flesh and blood. And that's true. And that's one of the things that myself and Guruji had actually, we would laugh about sometimes, because I would call our bodies meat suits. And when you think of your attachment to people, and it's like you really start analyzing the attachment, and the attachment is like you're attached to flesh, you're attached to the goo and blood and guts and everything that like makes up this physical body. And so it's just kind of funny to think about, because we are nothing but flesh and blood and guts and organs, and all of that is varying modifications, and it just composes a physical human body that our spirit is residing within. It is our vehicle while we're here. This is our current embodiment. This is what we have to work with. There's nothing substantial or real in this world. So that's in regards to nothing is substantial or real, because it's all transient. Every last thing in front of me in this room, it's all transient. It's not going to last forever. It is not eternal. There is only one eternal, and that is God. That's it. The creator, whatever name you want to give, the divine mother, that's it. That is the eternal, and we are from that. Our essence, our soul is from that. What resides within the depths of our heart, we are that. The 5 basic elements go to evolve diverse objects of pleasure for the ignorance-ridden minds of men. There is nothing unique in this world. And so the 5 basic elements, they do make up all these things. And when we suffer through the ignorance of ourself, our true self, and we haven't reconnected with this, we haven't gotten back in touch with this, we see everything as unique and like their own thing. And I'm trying to think of an example. So like with humans, we are all a species, the human species, scattered all over the planet, yet there's so much diversity and so much seclusion, and that alone causes a lot of problems. It causes wars and things like that. That's a whole nother topic. But because of this ignorance of not understanding and not knowing how we are all connected, it causes that separation. And we all think that we, as in like societies or individuals, think that we're unique or we're better and we differ from other people. And to a degree that is true at the surface level, at the visual level, at our limited mind's level of understanding. And we have to look beyond that physical, and understand the humanness of everyone. And that is how we are all connected. And we are all connected by the essence that is within us, which is connected to the essence which created everything. Like, the mountains didn't just pop up out of nowhere. The planet didn't just pop up out of nowhere. So whatever name you give to that is what we are all connected to, and we are all part of. We are that, and we are of that. We are in that. We are part of it. We belong to it like a limb on a body. That is how we are to the Creator, to creation, to everyone else around us. That is the self within us and the self within others. Veiled by the illusion of attachments, the mind of a person is unable to understand the nature of the divine self. How can he constantly meditate upon the self? So again, the illusion of attachments, when our attachments are consuming us so much, it's hard for us to understand the divine self. Like, if we're attached to our appearances, that's what we're basing our identification on. And if we're wanting to look a certain way, or dress a certain way, or act a certain way, or be seen by others a certain way, be portrayed a certain way, these attachments that go through our mind and contort our thoughts, it begins to control how we see ourselves. And then we're seeing ourselves through an illusion, and that's not who we are. Engrossed in grazing upon green grass, a goat accidentally falls from a high peak to his ruin. In the same way, engrossed in the pursuit of the objects of desire, human beings fall into the depths of misery and grief. So this is a good explanation of attachments and also distractions, and how consumed we can be. We can be so consumed by what we're doing, or what we're trying to attain, or what we're trying to get, or what we're trying to do. We're just so consumed in that pursuit that we don't even realize the misery and grief that we're causing ourselves. It's like when people, in regards to money, if people try to earn more money and money and more money and more money, and then they attain whatever goal it is. Like if they have a goal of making 6 figures a year, and they make those 6 figures a year, but then after a while that's still not enough, and they start craving and desiring more and more, and so that stress comes back, that anxiety comes back due to that attachment to what they're trying to attain, that money. And so being so engrossed into this, like the goat grazing on the grass that falls off of the cliff and dies, we can spend so much time chasing our desires and our attachments that this lifetime, this whole embodiment that we have, which is an amazing opportunity and a gift, is then now wasted. And that's where many people on their deathbeds, when their bodies are starting to expire and they have all these regrets, and they wish that they did things different, and they wish that they spent time differently because they were too consumed with Like, for example, people that are too consumed with their work, and so they don't spend much time with their family, and so their regrets end up being that they wish they did. Or when other loved ones pass away, like if you have a friend that passes away and you wish that you spent more time talking to them, reaching out, instead of not reaching out and choosing to chase whatever desires or attachments. And so we have to think of how we want to spend this lifetime, and what are we wanting out of it? What is the pursuit? And they talk about the pursuit of happiness in like college courses, and I think there's also a movie, I think, called The Pursuit of Happiness. I might be wrong. But that pursuit, what are we pursuing? And then how long are we dedicating to that pursuit? How much time, how much energy? And is it going to be worth it? Because we don't know when our time expires. We don't know when our time in this world is done. And we don't want to waste it. It's a gift. It's an absolute gift, and we should spend that doing what is good and what is right, and love all, serve all, be good, do good, and use this lifetime towards liberation and understanding and reconnecting and knowing ourself, our true self. Most people are like trees growing in dark pits. Their leaves, flowers, fruits, and shade are confined to a limited area. Others are not benefited by their existence. Growing within the confines of their selfish mind, they exercise their talents, wealth, and resources for their own egoistic satisfaction. Thus, they are unable to develop knowledge, humility, and other spiritual qualities. So when you think of like plants, and you plant them in a small container, usually they're going to stay kind of small. And then if you plant the same one in the ground, it has more freedom for those roots to grow and those roots to take hold and expand. And so when you have that room and you have that freedom, you have that nutrients, the sunshine, the healthy soil, and for us as human beings, that would be a supportive community of like-minded people and taking care of our physical health. That's a big part of our spiritual practice, is to prioritize physical health, emotional health, mental health. That all is a part of it too. And when we are able to do this, we become that tree that provides fruit and shade for others, and we can share with others. Others are benefited by our existence in this world. But if we're confining ourselves and sticking to ourselves and isolating ourselves and being selfish and egotistical, and our choices are all made in, well, what can I get out of this? How can I benefit from this? And just kind of say screw it to everybody else. That's not helpful, and that is going to limit someone in their development, in developing the positive and divine qualities that we want to have in this lifetime. We don't want to be mean, angry, stressed out people. We want to be nice and kind, caring, compassionate, loving, understanding, helpful people that contribute to society and make a difference in this world and make a difference in other people's lives. But if we're being selfish and we're just sticking to ourselves and we're not sharing whatever our talents are, and we're not sharing our good qualities, or we're hoarding wealth and money instead of using it for good, then we're not growing, we're not evolving, we're not developing as individuals, as a society, as humanity at large. And that's kind of how things are today. And in the scriptures, it's the Kali Yuga, and that's the time that it is right now. And that's where there is that decline in humanity, and there's so much of these demonic qualities that are very more present in people. There is a lot more ego, there is a lot more judgment and lack of compassion, and it just grows and it spreads, and that is like a poison to community, that is like a poison to society. But when people use their talents, and the talents don't have to be these grand things. They can be basically anything. Like, you don't have to know an instrument to have a talent. Your talent could just be being helpful. Your talent could be lending an ear to somebody. Your talent could be whenever you go out, you open doors for people and you just enjoy it, and you enjoy helping others. You don't have to be all fancy or anything like that. It doesn't have to be impressive for other people, because we're not doing it for other people's opinion. We're not doing it for other people's acknowledgement. We are doing it because it's a good thing to contribute, and it helps us to develop our divine qualities, and it helps us make progress in our own spiritual journey. And that is where we gain our knowledge. We become humble, and we have humility, and we have kindness and understanding and compassion towards everyone, not just humans, but we also show it to animals and pets. In this dreamlike world, men who are attached to perishable objects are seen everywhere, but those who are endowed with discrimination and dispassion are rarely found. And so the dreamlike world is what many would say is the reality of today. But in the spiritual sense, according to the scriptures, the dreamlike world is because all of this is an illusion, as in it's transient. It is not our true self. And so it's a dream, and we are not awake to our true self, and so we are asleep. And so with that, we have ignorance, and due to the ignorance, we're attached to what is perishable. And we see this everywhere, and we can see this in ourselves, because this is something that we work on in our spiritual practices. And we work towards developing discrimination. And discrimination is being able to determine the real from the unreal, and the truth from the not truth. And so you're able to look at things with a different perspective. You are able to understand that, like, the attachments to objects, to worldly objects, the attachments to our family members and things, we can understand and see where this can cause the pain, this can cause the sorrow, this can cause the grief. And you can love and you can support and you can enjoy the things in your life. It is the attachment part that is important to understand and develop that discrimination so you understand it. And like I mentioned earlier with shopping, and shopping it's a good example to use, especially around this time of year, with discrimination and dispassion. If you think of someone that's like a shopaholic, that has a shopping addiction and loves shopping, they're in the mindset of thinking that these objects, these products that I'm buying, this is what makes me happy. This is what brings me joy. But with developing discrimination, you can determine and you can know that they're transient objects. The feeling that you might be feeling is also transient and illusory. It is an illusion. And so from discrimination, we can develop dispassion. And dispassion is sometimes misinterpreted, but dispassion is, so take the shopper, the shopaholic, and instead of now having that fear of missing out on the latest sale, like recently was the Black Friday sales and Cyber Monday sales and everything, and that's where people do a lot of shopping for Christmas. They're able to have dispassion and make different choices. And so instead of having that fear of missing out on the sales, or that urge of having to buy, I have to have this when it goes on sale, this is what's going to make me happy, they're able to say, no, I'm okay without that. I don't need that. That object is the source of my panic, the source of my anxiety, the source of my stress. And so you start to not want those things. You start to understand that a life can be lived without those attachments, without those unhealthy desires. And in the scriptures, it talks about this a lot. And myself and Guruji had many conversations about this, because I used to love shopping. And I was one of those people where I would very impulsively buy things, honestly, to spite other people. Like, I didn't want someone else to have it, and so I would buy it. And yeah, not good. That was how I used to be. And then I used to think all these things like made me happy, and then I'd find myself cranky again and in the mindset of, oh, I just need to go to Target. I just need to walk around Target. Target will make me happy. And that's also falling trap to marketing. And when you learn more about marketing and how that all works, it's kind of easy to spot the traps. But developing the discrimination over time with my spiritual journey, and being able to recognize and then understand that what I was feeling was an illusion. That was the trick of Maya, and I was falling into the net of that. And when you're able to see it for what it is, you can then develop the dispassion to say no. And another example with this is for like alcohol is an addiction. And a lot of people can turn to alcohol to make themselves feel better or to numb themselves. And so that craving is there, that desire is there. And then when you join Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, you join support groups and you begin to learn by teachers and other people's experiences with these things, and you begin to see it for what it truly was, the role that the alcohol was playing. And it actually wasn't a source of happiness. It wasn't a source of something good. It was actually causing pain and sorrow, and for many people, a lot more problems. And so eventually you get to the point where that dispassion comes in and you don't want it anymore because you see it for what it is. And so if we take that method of thinking and understanding and we truly analyze things and the transient nature of it and really think like, what emotions am I experiencing? What feelings am I experiencing when I'm interacting with this object, with this, yes, Jim, just like with food, it's linked to emotions and how we're feeling, and we have to really analyze and look at these things and dig deep. And this is where being consistent in our practices is important, because it gets easier and you learn more about not only yourself but these guiding principles and the way you can distinguish between objects of the world and how humans interact with them. It not only leads into the dispassion that we will experience ourselves in our journey, but we understand others better also. And so we can have more compassion, we can have more empathy, we can have more understanding, we can have less judgment. And so it spreads, and that's where it's like the waft of sandalwood, like Guruji explained, and it just spreads to other people, and that fruit-bearing tree that provides shade to others, and they can come and rest. Thank you, Malini G. So that's the end of the section 27 that Guruji had left off on. If y'all like, I don't mind continuing on the best that I can. I'm more than happy to do that. Y'all just let me know if you're interested. I can keep it at the same time. I'm Central Standard Time, so I'm in Texas. So right now it is 10:21. And Guruji had recently dedicated the Yoga Vasistha studies to Thursdays instead of on Fridays. So, but if Fridays are better, y'all just let me know. I'm completely open to feedback. I would love to be interactive. I do run the Facebook group, and I'll be trying to work more on that to keep the community together, because I know so many of us are feeling a bit lost right now. We lost a very great divine soul too soon, which my own selfishness is, and my own attachments. God's plan is God's plan, and divine time is not up to us. It is absolutely not up to us. But it can still hurt. It hurts to lose a guiding light in this world, and what is left is the teachings, and there is so much out there that Guruji spent so many years putting together. So I do encourage everyone to go to the YouTube channel and watch as many videos as you can. Buy the scripture books from the Yoga Research Foundation if you can. Follow along. And if anyone has questions or needs support, I'm always here. I do have personal health issues, so sometimes if I'm not responding right away, that's usually why. But I'm always happy to help. I'm always happy to explain things or answer questions the best that I can. So y'all just let me know, and I hope this helped ease a bit of the pain for others and helps keep us on our routines, because there's a few of us who have been doing this for a few years now, a couple times a week with Guruji and Swami LP, and we just need to keep on keeping on. So we'll close this out. Trayambakam yajamahe sugandim pushtivardhanam urvarukamiva bandhanan mrityor mukshiyamamritat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Jai Gurudev. Om Tat Sat, everybody. Have a good evening.